When you ask a mother what would be worth dying for, I'm willing to bet that the top answer would be her children. It's funny because parents think they would die first, right? But rightly so, because I believe no parent should suffer through the loss of a child. Okay. My firstborn son's name was Jason Seth. I would have nicknamed him Jet, kaya lang he lived only for barely 2 days. I recall that I was in for a checkup only that day. And when I was barely 8 months, and my OB told me that we had to have the cesarean operation that same evening because of fetal distress. And Jet's oxygen supply was low, and so if we didn't operate that night, he would die in utero. When Jet came out of my womb, he was immediately surrounded by family. My OB was my sister-in-law. My brother is also a surgeon and was in the operating room with her, while my husband and my mother waited outside. It was my brother who nudged me from my drug-induced sleep to tell me that it was a baby boy, and briefly placed my baby on my chest until the pediatrician took him away. Jet was born with underdeveloped lungs. Apparently, when you're a baby, your lungs is covered with this called surfactant that helps it develop and grow. Because he was premature, when the baby comes out of the womb, that liquid is supposed to be absorbed so that he could breathe in the surrounding air. Okay. So when Jet was born, sorry, I forgot. Okay, so when he was born, he was barely 8 months, so his lungs was premature, and it had a difficult time making that switch. So he had to be attached to a respirator. And it's not the ordinary respirator, but it's the one that you have to manually operate. And so my dear brother, sat in front of the incubator and did the loving act of pressing and the right compression to respiration ratio so that the right amount of oxygen will gently be delivered to the lungs of Jet. In the meantime, I was in my hospital bed and recuperating from the surgery, and I was wondering why my baby hadn't been roomed in yet. And so only when my brother walked in the room, wearing the same clothes from the night before, with eyes red, shoulders slumped, that I realized that something was wrong. And as he told me the condition of Jet and told me what the medical options were and the futility of each one and the almost zero chance of survival, I found myself getting up from bed, asking for a wheelchair, and demanding to see my son. So in less than 36 hours from my operation, I was wheeled into the neonatal intensive care unit, where I saw my son for the second time in an incubator. So he was so small and tiny and pale and white, and I never felt so helpless in my life. It was my sister-in-law who suggested that he be taken out of the incubator so I could hold him in my arms, to which my husband strongly objected. And I was like looking at him and I thought, who are you? I don't know you. Why are you objecting? Why not? Right? And I guess what was going on in his head was that if I held my dying son in my arms, if only just for a few seconds, that also meant that I would hold the heavier burden of his loss forever. And he wasn't wrong. He was only looking after my best interest. But what was going in my head was, what kind of mother would I be if I didn't hold my dying son in the last moments of his life? And so it ended up that my husband and I took turns holding Jet while he struggled to take his last few breaths. We came home that afternoon, all three of us, and had an impromptu wake in our house in Green Hills. And I remember having relatives and friends come over, and I was thinking, wow, who told them, who asked them to come, how did they know? And I didn't talk to anyone. I just sat on a rocking chair that I used while I was pregnant with Jet, but was now placed in front of his white coffin that was the size of a shoebox. And I waited for everyone to leave. That night I had difficulty sleeping, and even when I did, I woke up around 4 a.m. to the sound of church bells ringing, and I was wondering if there were any churches nearby who had them. And then I felt floating from the bed. I felt as if I was floating from the bed, and I swear that if I deserved it that night, I was thinking I was dying and going up to heaven. And I wasn't scared. I was at peace with that. After all, right, I had a good reason to go and the best companion to help me cross to the other side. So I took a last look around the room, and I saw my husband sleeping on the bed. And I paused. And I imagined how it would break him to wake up, still grieving from the loss of a son, only to wake up and suffer through the loss of a wife. Instinctively, I grabbed his hand, and it anchored me back on the bed. And he woke up, and he asked, "Are you okay?" Siyempre not, diba? Pero considering everything, like, I didn't know how to answer that question. But I did remember telling him, we have to get up now. Today we bury our son. On the way to the cemetery, I guess existential questions were like popping into my head, like, what's all this for? What's the point of all this? You get married, you get pregnant, you have a baby, you lose the baby, you bury the baby, and you do it all over again. What's the point of death? If not to make life seem like a futile exercise with this hopeless intimations and useless gestures. But as I watched the crowd gather during the burial in the cemetery, I saw my father-in-law for the first time, holding his granddaughter ever so lightly in his arms. I saw my sister holding the hands of her younger son ever more tightly. And I saw couples regarding each other a little bit differently. Because if there's one thing that death does, it's to put things into perspective. And for me that day, loss was no longer an absence, but this imperceptible but permanent presence that highlights what is concrete, tangible, and evident, that life is precious. So surround yourself with people you love and who love you. Take a chance on that random and bizarre event, right? Cherish those moments of bonding and nurture your relationships. Because only after that will you realize that life, it's a hard out. Life is a hard out, it is. And after everything, after all that mess, after it's ended, just be grateful. Be grateful. That's it. Thanks all. Thank you.